Section 3, Communication. So in the previous section we talked in detail about how invoices tell us what product was delivered, and it's important to check those. The next thing is that when we use product, most of the time we'll know that the product has been used because it will be rung into the point of sale system. So the point of sale system is very much the default way to communicate. Obviously that requires that the point of sale system is set up correctly, and we'll have more on that later. But generally speaking, if you receive product via invoices which are correct and checked, and then every time you use product it's rung into the point of sale, that's the end of the story. What we're talking about with communication is when either of those two things doesn't happen. If you either receive product without an invoice, or product leaves or is used without being precisely rung into the point of sale, we need to know about it. So when you can't ring it into the point of sale correctly, the best thing to do is to write it down on the communication worksheet, which you'll have placed behind the bar, or if you prefer, maybe you already have a booklet you put behind the bar, and use it. And I say that because there's a lot of bars that have a communication log and they get 2 notes in there per month. If we only have 2 notes in the log on the communication sheet each week or so, there's either one or two things going on. Most typically it's because it's simply not being used and we're missing a whole bunch of things that should be written down. The other possibility is your point of sale is set up so brilliantly and your staff is so on board that they're doing everything correctly. The latter, I'm sorry to say, is less common. So get in the habit of, if you're not sure about something, it's better to have too many communication notes than too few. Last section we discussed this, but we should note things on invoices when possible because they're there right at the time that we need to make the adjustment. And if not, the next best way is to write down on the communication worksheet behind the bar. And then the final best method is there is a communication tab actually within the self-count software, and you can also note adjustments on that. The reason I don't like that method as much is because it relies on you remembering what adjustments there are to be made. You have to save those up until the day you do your count. The advantage of using a communication worksheet behind the bar is at the time when you ring something up strangely or you need to make an adjustment, you can note it and then you scan it along with your invoices, and it's a much more effective, easier to use system. Another element of communication is that we talked about signing off on recipes, but we need to have exact recipes in our system, and in turn those recipes and portion sizes need to be communicated to the staff. We will go through that in detail. If your staff doesn't know that your standard liquor pour size is 1.5 ounces, the chance of them correctly pouring it is pretty low. So communication with your staff is also important here to get them on the page of what we're doing here with Bar I. Mention that, but communication notes should be written at the time of the adjustment so you don't have to remember them. If you get verbaled 15 different things over a busy shift, you will never remember it, so encourage your staff to write them down, and that shares everybody in the responsibility of getting this right. And as we mentioned, if you're a new client or an incoming new manager, it's also important that you review the recipes we're using to calculate your numbers and sign off on them, A, to ensure they're correct, and B, so that you know they're correct, so that when your staff are asking you about this, you have confidence, and ultimately being confident in the results will mean that they're more effective because we'll act on them more. So additional details: when we have the information we need, we can provide the best service for our clients, save manager time, and ultimately be more profitable and do the best service we can. Missing information wastes significant time, both ours and yours, and reduces the overall effectiveness of the system in a number of ways. So let me just quickly explain here. We used the example earlier about a case of wine being taken or purchased for the owner and they send it away. The trouble with us is, as a professional inventory company, obviously we're expected to be correct, and so anytime something is off and strange looking, we have to double check our work before we come to you and say, hey, what's up with this? In a case where it's something which just could have been written down, it's rather frustrating, so it's really appreciated if you can write this information down at the time, and like I said, in this case, more is less. If in doubt, write a note. If it's not that relevant, we can always ignore it. As we said, most critically, invoices need to be in all available in one place in Dropbox in advance of counting the day before. And then any other exceptions which affect accountability numbers must be communicated ideally by marking your invoices, by writing on your communication worksheet, next best, or if not, in the communication sheet of the self-count tool. So just for the sake of being extra detailed, let's run through a couple of examples where we need to have communication written down. First one is if the product delivered doesn't match what's written on the invoice. Obviously that requires you are checking the product delivered against the invoice, and we went into detail on that earlier. Next one is if product arrives without an invoice. Technically this is not allowed in most states, but the reality is it happens. Sometimes your distributors will give you a half bottle, or after a tasting you'll keep it, and it's useful to write that down. This is a big one, private parties. So the ideal way for us to have a private party is to ring up all the drinks individually, and then if you're not charging them per drink, you can comp off those drinks. Don't void them because you'll erase that record, but comp the amount off so that you can have that record in the point of sale system, but not have to take that money from the clients. And another upside of the why you should ring in private party sales individually, drink by drink, even if you're not charging them that way, is so you can compare what it was you charged your private party versus what they spent on a retail basis per client. You know, if the average bar spend per person was $12 and you charged them 10, that's probably fine because it's a sort of a scale economies of a group. Equally, if they used $15 each and you charged them 10, you're probably missing out there. Another two ones, again, technically not allowed, but it happens, so useful to let us know. If you're in the habit of perhaps lending or borrowing product from nearby bars if you run out, it's important that be written down. And obviously we need it to happen both ways. If you lend it out, we need to have it written down, and that's also important so that you can remember to collect it when they return that product to you. We like to call this jokingly research and development, but it's not uncommon to be given products or for people to take product home to test it. Obviously that's important to do. It's part of the fun actually of getting free samples of work in this industry. But again, if you're removing this product and it's not being rung into the point of sale, we please need to know about it. Either ring it up, ideal, or write it down if you can't do that. Another one, a lot of times if you send back a bad keg, it might take a week or so for us to get a return credit amongst your invoices. So again, it's always appreciated if you can write a note if you return product. Another one is product subs. If you ring one product but pour another, example, on a busy Friday night, maybe you run out of Jack Daniels and you start pouring Jim Beam. If you do that a lot of times, we're going to have one product up and the other down. So again, it would be grateful if you could say, hey, we ran out of Jack Daniels, or we run as the other. Another one would be new recipes. There's also the opportunity to put this into the communication sheet, but most times we will know what the button is. For instance, if you added Jack Rocks button, we'll know your standard rocks pour is perhaps 2 ounces, and we'll be able to write that recipe without consultation. However, if you add that new button, Top Shelf Marg, obviously that doesn't indicate the specific tequila used or what liqueur or triple sec you're using, so it's appreciated if you can write that down for us. And then finally, we want to try and get rid, or not get rid of, but stop using your open buttons, because they obviously are open. They don't indicate what's being poured. You have no control over what's being poured and what's being charged. What we're going to do is presume that those buttons are a single serving. So if you ring up open wine, but it's for a whole bottle, then it creates a problem, because we'll just assign probably 6 ounces when actually you serve the whole bottle. One way around that might be to add an open wine bottle button so that you can ring up open wine glass and open wine bottle separately.